one stopped laughing. It started with a comment about activism. Meghan was mid-sentence, explaining her approach to advocacy, when Emma Thompson tilted her head and asked a simple question. The audience caught the shift before Graham did. Something in the air changed. Meghan's smile hardened. Emma's remained warm, but her eyes had sharpened. Over the next 12 minutes, the red couch became a battleground. Every point Meghan made, Emma gently dismantled. Every claim of persecution met quiet, devastating context from a woman who'd navigated fame for 40 years without once playing victim. And by minute 20, when Emma said 5 words that cut through every defense Meghan had constructed, the audience gasped. What happened next had never happened on the Graham Norton show. This is the one everyone's going to be talking about. Subscribe now, hit that notification bell, and let's get into it. The Graham Norton Show studio at BBC Television Centre was buzzing with anticipation. Tonight's couch featured a particularly stellar lineup. Dame Emma Thompson promoting her latest film, Hugh Grant discussing his new project, David Tennant fresh from his acclaimed series, and, generating the most pre-show chatter, Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex. The show began smoothly. Graham worked his way through the guests, Hugh's self-deprecating stories about his latest role, David's animated tales from his recent series, Emma's thoughtful discussion of her film. So Emma, you and Hugh go way back. Sense and Sensibility, Love Actually. How many times have you worked together? Too many. I know all his tricks now. The floppy hair, the stammering, the pretending to be befuddled. It's all an act. It's absolutely an act, Hugh confirmed. I'm actually quite decisive. I just discovered early that women find confusion attractive. They find it manageable, Emma corrected. Different thing entirely. The audience roared. The couch had its familiar, warm energy. Graham turned to Meghan. And Meghan, you've been busy. The digital safety work, Switzerland recently. Tell us about that. It was deeply meaningful, honoring young people lost to online harm. The crisis is real and under-addressed. Emma leaned forward with genuine interest. What specific policies are you advocating? I've done some work in this area myself. The tech regulation debates can be quite complex. Meghan seemed caught off guard by the direct question. We're working with partners to develop comprehensive approaches. Which partners specifically? I ask because I found the landscape quite fractured. Different organizations with different agendas. The details are being refined. Emma's expression remained warm, but something sharpened behind her eyes. Refined for how long? You've been talking about digital safety for several years now. At some point, advocacy needs to convert to specifics. Hugh shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the shift in tone. He attempted intervention with characteristic deflection. I've found the safest digital policy is simply not understanding technology. Can't be harmed by what you can't operate. David played along. Hugh still uses a flip phone. It's genuinely tragic. It's genuinely liberating. Nobody can reach me. It's bliss. But Meghan hadn't taken the off-ramp. Her posture had stiffened. I have substance, she said, still addressing Emma. I'm sure you do, darling. I'm just asking what it is. You mentioned working with partners. Which ones? You mentioned developing approaches. What are they? My foundation's work is documented. Is it? I've looked, actually. I was curious after the Switzerland Memorial. Lovely event, but I couldn't find specific policy outcomes. Lots of awareness, lots of statements, but actual legislation influenced? Actual systems changed? David and Hugh exchanged glances. The audience had gone quiet. Our work operates on multiple levels. All work operates on multiple levels, but work that matters eventually produces results you can point to. What are yours? Graham attempted to steer away from the tension. Perhaps we could talk about... I'd actually like to address this, Meghan said, her voice carrying an edge. I've raised significant awareness about issues that matter. Awareness is the easiest possible metric, Emma replied gently. It's what you claim when you can't claim anything else. I've been around long enough to recognize awareness as a consolation prize for lack of achievement. Hugh winced visibly. Emma, perhaps we could. What? I'm asking genuine questions. She came here to promote her work. I'm interested in what the work actually accomplishes. David cleared his throat. I think what I'm getting at is quite clear, Emma said. I've been doing activism adjacent to my career for decades. The activists I respect most can point to specific laws changed, specific policies implemented. They don't talk about awareness. They talk about outcomes. Meghan's face had gone red. Perhaps our approaches differ. Perhaps, but different approaches still get judged by results. What results can you point to? Hugh leaned forward, attempting his trademark charm as a peace offering. You know, I found that all charitable work is difficult to measure. I've supported various causes and couldn't tell you specific outcomes either. Emma turned to him with affectionate exasperation. Yes, but you don't center your entire public identity around those causes, darling. You show up, write a check, occasionally look handsome at a gala. That's appropriate celebrity involvement. It's not the same as building a foundation and claiming to change systems. Fair point, Hugh conceded, retreating. David tried a different angle. The awareness piece does matter, though. Sometimes just getting people talking about an issue. Opens doors, yes, Emma agreed. But you have to walk through the doors eventually. Meghan's been opening doors for 5 years. I'm asking what's on the other side. Meghan grabbed her water glass, took a long sip, set it down carefully. I don't believe I should have to justify my humanitarian work on an entertainment program. You're here to promote that work, darling. Promotion includes explanation. If you can't explain it on Norton, where it's friendly, how do you explain it anywhere? Let me ask you something, Meghan said, her voice low. Have you ever experienced racism? The studio went silent. Hugh looked like he wanted to disappear into the couch cushions. David froze. Emma considered the question carefully. I've experienced discrimination as a woman. I've witnessed racism many times. I've worked in anti-racism efforts for decades. But you're asking if I've personally experienced being targeted for my race? No, I'm white. I haven't. Then perhaps you shouldn't lecture me about what I face. I'm not lecturing you about racism. I'm asking about your foundation's outcomes. Those are different topics. You've introduced racism to deflect from questions about your work. That's a rhetorical tactic, not a conversation. Hugh rubbed his face with his hands, a gesture his fans would recognize as genuine discomfort. Perhaps we could all just... It's context, Meghan insisted, ignoring him. It's evasion, Emma replied calmly. I asked what your foundation has accomplished. You responded with awareness. I asked for specifics. You couldn't provide them. Now you're suggesting I can't question you because I'm white. That's using identity as a shield against accountability. It doesn't work with me. Meghan stood up. I don't have to subject myself to this. Graham rose from his chair. Meghan, please, let's all take a breath. I came here to discuss my work. Instead, I've been interrogated by someone who's decided I'm not worthy of the platform I've earned. Emma remained seated, completely calm. You haven't earned any platform, darling. You married into one. That's not criticism. It's fact. Every tabloid in the world covered your wedding. That coverage gave you a platform. What you've done with it since is the question. Hugh covered his eyes. Oh, God. David sat frozen, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. I've tried to help people, Meghan began. Trying isn't doing. At my age, I've learned the difference. Plenty of people try. Results are what matter. You don't know what I've accomplished privately. Private accomplishments are lovely, but they don't justify public platforms. You use your platform constantly, for documentaries, for interviews, for statements. If you can't discuss your work publicly, why do you work publicly? Meghan gathered her purse. This is exactly what I told my team would happen. What did you tell them? That someone might ask you to substantiate your claims? That basic accountability would feel like attack? If so, you were right. And you should ask yourself why that's your expectation. Meghan moved toward the edge of the stage. Hugh stood up instinctively, though it wasn't clear what he intended to do. You're everything they said you were, Meghan said to Emma. Who said what about me? The British establishment. Cold, superior, closed. Emma's smile remained warm. Darling, I've spent 40 years being called too outspoken, too political, too willing to challenge the establishment. They don't claim me. I'm simply someone who asks questions. If that feels like the establishment to you, perhaps examine how you've defined yourself against everyone who doesn't simply agree with you. Meghan walked off. The studio door closed behind her. The remaining guests sat in stunned silence. Hugh was the first to speak. Well, that's certainly never happened when I've been on. Has that ever happened at all? David asked Graham, genuinely bewildered. Never. Not in all the years I've done this show. Emma sighed. I feel rather terrible. I wasn't trying to chase her off. I was genuinely curious. Your genuine curiosity is rather more intense than most people's, Hugh observed. I've known you for 30 years. It still frightens me occasionally. Graham took a breath, attempting to restore some normalcy. We should probably acknowledge what just happened before we try to continue. Emma nodded. I asked a guest to describe her foundation's accomplishments. She couldn't. I asked about specific policies she supports. She couldn't name them. I asked what results she could point to. She talked about awareness. When pressed for anything concrete, she accused me of racism-adjacent criticism and left. Hugh shook his head slowly. The thing is, those were perfectly reasonable questions. I've been asked far worse by actual journalists. I once had someone ask me if my entire career was based on playing the same character repeatedly. They weren't wrong, by the way. I've been asked if Doctor Who ruined my potential for serious work, David added. While I was promoting serious work. Questions can be uncomfortable and still be fair. That's exactly the point, Emma said. Uncomfortable isn't unfair. I've faced questions about every project I've ever done. Some were hostile. Most weren't. Knowing the difference matters. Graham turned to camera. We're going to take a brief break. When we come back, we'll continue with our remaining guests and try to recover some sense of whatever this was before it went sideways. During the commercial break, the couch processed what had occurred. Should I not have pushed? Emma asked. Hugh shook his head. You asked about her work. That's what interviews are for. David leaned forward. What struck me was how fast it escalated. You asked about partners. That's a friendly question. And suddenly we were discussing racism and privilege. It's a technique, Emma observed. When you can't answer substantive questions, you reframe them as attacks on your identity. Then the questioner becomes the villain, and you escape accountability. Does it work? Graham asked. It works on people afraid of being called racist. It doesn't work on people who know they're not. Hugh laughed despite himself. Emma Thompson, afraid of being called things. The woman who told Harvey Weinstein to his face that we don't need to revisit that. We absolutely need to revisit that. When they returned from break, Graham addressed the audience directly. We've just experienced something unprecedented in the history of this show. A guest walked off mid-taping. I want to be clear that Dame Emma Thompson conducted herself entirely appropriately. She asked questions about work that was being promoted. The questions were fair. The departure was unexpected. Emma nodded. I've been on this couch many times. I faced difficult questions. I've laughed at myself. I've admitted failures. That's what the couch is for. Being human. What I witnessed was someone unable or unwilling to be human. Just performance all the way down. Hugh leaned back thoughtfully. You know what strikes me? We've all done press for projects that didn't work. films that flopped, shows that got canceled. We answer questions about them anyway, because that's the job. David agreed. I did press for a project once where I knew halfway through the interview it was terrible. Still answered questions. Still tried to find something genuine to say. That's what professionalism means. Exactly, Emma said. The willingness to engage even when engagement is uncomfortable. That's what separates people who do real work from people who perform working. The footage aired that Friday night. BBC made no edits. The clips that spread captured the contrast in devastating clarity. Awareness is the easiest possible metric. It's what you claim when you can't claim anything else. You haven't earned any platform, darling. You married into one. Using identity as a shield against accountability doesn't work with me. If questions feel like attacks, the problem isn't the questions. Hugh's reaction shots became memes, his visible discomfort capturing what everyone at home was feeling. David's frozen bewilderment similarly spread, a perfect representation of the audience's shock. Meghan's team released a statement calling the appearance an orchestrated ambush by establishment figures protecting institutional interests. Emma responded through Twitter with characteristic brevity. I asked about policy outcomes and foundation accomplishments. Those are progressive questions. They're the questions any serious progressive would ask before supporting a cause. The inability to answer them isn't my ambush, it's her limitation. Hugh added his own statement, rare for him. I was there. I saw what happened. Emma asked fair questions. The escalation came entirely from one side. I've known Emma for 30 years. She's many things, but an establishment figure protecting institutional interests isn't one of them. Graham addressed it on the following week's show. Last week's program generated significant discussion. I've hosted the show for over 20 years. I've never had a guest walk off because another guest asked them to explain their work. Emma asked fair questions. Meghan couldn't answer them. That's the full story. Calling it an ambush is redefining ambush to mean accountability I didn't want. He paused, then smiled. Also, if Emma Thompson, Hugh Grant, and David Tennant constitute the establishment, then the establishment has become significantly more entertaining than I remembered. The audience laughed. Something like normalcy had been restored. But for those who'd watched the original episode, the image remained. One woman who'd built 40 years of genuine achievement, sitting calmly, while another woman, unable to answer basic questions about her own work, fled into the night. For Dame Emma Thompson, the confrontation became an unexpected chapter in a legendary career, proof that her commitment to authenticity extended even to uncomfortable moments on comfortable couches. For Hugh Grant and David Tennant, it became a story they'd tell for years, the night they witnessed something unprecedented on television's friendliest set. For Meghan Markle, it was devastating. She'd walked into the friendliest room in British television and been undone not by a hostile interviewer, but by a fellow guest who simply asked her to describe her accomplishments. But for the millions who watched, the contrast told its own story. 4 guests on the same couch, 3 who could laugh at themselves, discuss their failures, and engage with any question thrown at them, and 1 who fled when asked to specify what she'd actually done. Emma had offered conversation. Meghan had experienced interrogation. And in that gap, between what was offered and what was perceived, everything anyone needed to know about the difference between actual accomplishment and performed accomplishment became clear. Some people build things. Others build narratives about building things. Only one survives genuine questioning. The dame asked 5 words. What have you actually accomplished? The answer was silence, then flight. What does that tell you? If you want more content that cuts through the performance, subscribe. Join a community that sees what's real. Share this with someone. They need to see what happened. More truth, more real content.